Sarah was known for her carefree attitude. She lived in a small, peaceful town surrounded by rolling hills and green fields. It was the type of place where the pace of life was slow, and people took their time to appreciate the little things. But Sarah had always taken this ease for granted. Time seemed endless to her, and she often found herself wasting entire days scrolling through her phone or lounging around with no real purpose. At 25, Sarah still hadn't figured out what she wanted to do with her life. She had a part-time job at a local cafe, but beyond that, she had no real ambitions or plans. Every day felt like a repeat of the last, and while her friends from high school had moved on to exciting careers or were starting families, Sarah remained stuck, feeling like she had all the time in the world to figure things out. Her parents, who had always supported her, had grown increasingly concerned. They often reminded her that time was precious and that every day she let pass was a day she wouldn't get back. But Sarah shrugged off their concerns, convinced that one day things would just fall into place for her. One summer evening, as she was sitting on the porch, Sarah's old friend, Emily, came to visit. Emily had been one of Sarah's closest friends growing up, but they had drifted apart over the years. Emily had left town for university, graduated, and had recently returned for a visit. She seemed different, more confident, more mature. As they sat catching up, Emily's stories of life in the city and her budding career made Sarah feel like she had been left behind. "I can't believe how fast time flies," Emily said, sipping her tea. "It feels like just yesterday we were in high school, and now here we are, adults with real responsibilities." Sarah nodded but remained silent, her mind wandering. "What about you, Sarah? What have you been up to?" Emily asked, her tone kind but curious. "Oh, just working at the cafe. Hanging out, nothing too exciting," Sarah replied casually. Emily gave her a thoughtful look. "It's easy to get comfortable, I guess. But don't you ever feel like time's slipping away?" Sarah chuckled, trying to shake off the discomfort. "I don't really think about it that way. I've got plenty of time to figure things out." Emily smiled softly but said nothing more. As the evening wore on, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that maybe Emily was right. Maybe time was slipping away, and she hadn't even noticed. That night, lying in bed, Sarah thought about her life. She thought about the days that had blended into weeks and months, all of them passing without much significance. She realized that she had been waiting for something to happen, for life to come knocking on her door and present her with a purpose. But that hadn't happened, and she had no idea how to make it happen. The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling restless. She looked around her room, at the familiar surroundings, and felt a deep sense of dissatisfaction. She grabbed her phone and mindlessly scrolled through social media. But even that didn't bring the usual sense of distraction. That day, she decided to take a walk around town, hoping that some fresh air might clear her mind. As she walked, she passed the park where she used to play as a child, the school she had attended, and the cafe where she now worked. It all felt so small, so routine, as if she had been living in a bubble all these years. Just as she was about to head home, she noticed a small sign outside the local community center that read, "Time Management Workshop. Learn the value of time." Intrigued, she decided to check it out. She had nothing else to do, and maybe it would be a good distraction. The workshop was being led by a woman named Dr. Claire Watson, a time management expert who had traveled the world teaching people how to make the most of their time. Sarah had never really given much thought to how she spent her time, but as Dr. Watson spoke, she found herself captivated. Time is our most valuable resource, Dr. Watson began. It's the one thing we can never get back. Once a moment is gone, it's gone forever. And yet, so many of us waste it as if we have an endless supply. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, feeling as though the words were directed at her. Dr. Watson continued, "The truth is, how we spend our time is a reflection of what we value. If we spend our days doing things that don't bring us closer to our goals or enrich our lives, we're essentially saying that our time and our lives don't matter." Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She had never thought about her time in that way before. She had always assumed she had plenty of it, but now she wasn't so sure. Now I want you all to think about how you've spent your time over the past week. Dr. Watson instructed, "What have you done that truly matters? What have you done that brings you closer to the life you want to live?" Sarah's mind raced. What had she done? She couldn't think of anything meaningful. She had worked a few shifts at the cafe, watched some TV, hung out with friends, and spent hours scrolling through her phone. None of it felt significant. None of it felt like it was leading her anywhere. After the workshop, Sarah felt a mix of emotions, guilt, regret, but also a newfound sense of urgency. She realized that she had been taking time for granted, assuming that she would always have more of it. But now, she wasn't so sure. She didn't want to look back on her life and realize that she had wasted it. Determined to make a change, Sarah decided to start small. The next morning, she set her alarm for 7 a.m., much earlier than her usual time, and began her day with a purpose. She made a list of things she wanted to accomplish, things that would make her feel productive and fulfilled. She started reading books she had always wanted to read, applied for a few jobs that piqued her interest, and even signed up for an online course to learn a new skill. At first, it was hard. She was so used to living in the moment without any real plan or direction. But slowly, as the days went by, she began to feel a sense of accomplishment. She realized that she had been stuck in a cycle of procrastination, waiting for life to happen to her, when in reality, she had to make things happen for herself. One day, while she was working at the cafe, she received a call. It was from one of the companies she had applied to. They wanted to interview her for a position in their marketing department. Sarah was shocked. She hadn't expected to hear back so soon, and suddenly, her life felt like it was moving forward. The interview went well, and a week later, she received the job offer. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she had a clear path ahead of her. It wasn't just about the job, it was about the fact that she had taken control of her life and her time. Months passed, and Sarah's life began to transform. She found herself valuing every moment, making sure that her time was spent doing things that mattered. She no longer wasted hours scrolling through her phone or lounging around without purpose. Instead, she filled her days with meaningful activities, learning new skills, spending quality time with friends and family, and working towards her goals. One evening, as Sarah sat in her new apartment in the city, she thought back to that summer evening when Emily had visited her. She smiled, realizing how far she had come since then. The carefree days of wasting time were behind her, and now she understood the true value of time. It wasn't just about being busy, it was about being intentional. Sarah had learned that time was her most valuable resource, and she wasn't going to waste it anymore. Every day was an opportunity, a gift, and she was determined to make the most of it. From that point on, Sarah lived her life with a newfound sense of purpose. She no longer took time for granted, and as a result, her life became richer, more fulfilling, and full of possibilities. And she knew one thing for sure: time, once lost, could never be regained. But as long as she was mindful of how she spent it, she would never feel like it was slipping away again.